Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, social marketers around the world. My name is Patrick Cook, and as president of the International Social Marketing Association, it's both my privilege and, as always, my pleasure to introduce the 38th in a series of webinars designed to advance social marketing, teaching, research, and practice. So I'm here with Dave Cutter, our technical host, myself, Christine Jennings, and Tamara Harbour. Christine and Tamara have organized today's webinar and are going to be serving as our host today. Dave is our technical host for the webinar series and expertly manages the back end of our webinars. And of course, we have Jeff French, our guest speaker today. We're going to begin in just a minute, but before we do, I'd like to share a couple of updates from the International Social Marketing Association. First off, obviously everyone on this call and our families and communities are dealing with the impact of COVID-19. So we wanted to acknowledge that and hope you're all healthy and safe. In response, we've also asked Jeff to take into account our collective situation in this pandemic in his planned presentation. So we also will have an opportunity to do a Q&A at the end of Jeff's presentation. We're also responding to COVID-19 in other ways. For example, the Australian Association of Social Marketing, one of our member associations, has developed an excellent statement on this issue. And I really would encourage you to visit their website. The URL is there on your screen. Excuse me, it includes succinct recommendations on tackling the problem based on the collective knowledge and experience of the social marketing community. Also, in the coming days, ISMA is going to be aggregating even more resources like this one developed by IASM. So please do stay tuned to our website and your inbox for what's coming next. Also want to let you know that ISMA has, Christine and I are really proud to announce that we have started our first online course. And it's taught by someone that many of you know, our veteran social marketer, Nancy Lee. This 12-week course is now underway, and students who successfully complete the course will receive a professional certificate of completion. And the good news is we're planning another course for later in 2020, so ISMA members will receive more information in the coming weeks about that. And if you're not a member, please do join us. We encourage you to sign up. It's one of the many benefits of membership in our associations. As well, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook if you also want to receive updates that way. And speaking of online, we are getting close to completion. Our ISMA volunteers have been working really hard on putting the final touches on our new website, which will have a lot more features and much easier to navigate. We expect to launch this new site in the next few weeks, so stay tuned again to your inbox, to social media, and to our old website for announcements about that, excuse me. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christine so we can get started.
Thanks, Patrick, and welcome everyone. As we get ready to introduce Jeff, I'd like to encourage all of you to communicate with the webinar team using the chat box. If you have any technical questions or need help, the team is behind the scenes and can help you with that. If you are interested in submitting questions directly to Jeff for the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, at the bottom of your screen, please make sure you use the Q&A box that looks like this. You can feel free to submit your questions as they come to you anytime during the webinar. You certainly don't have to wait till the end of the talk. And if we receive a lot of questions, we may, in the chat box, ask participants to help us rank the questions that they are hoping that Jeff will answer with the limited time that we'll have available. So now I'd like to turn over the webinar to Tamara Harbour, our moderator for today's session. Tamara?
Thank you, Christine. I'm very happy to be introducing Professor Jeff French as our featured presenter today. Jeff is a global thought leader in social marketing and social program planning and evaluation, having worked in over 30 countries on behavior change and social policy programs. Not only has Jeff published over 100 papers and 5 books, he is on the editorial board of 4 professional journals and a member of several national and international policy committees. In 2005, Jeff led the UK Government Review of Social Marketing, and in 2006, set up the National Social Marketing Centre. And considering the challenging times we are in, trying to manage the global spread of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, it's worth highlighting Jeff's experience and expertise in social marketing for health. Previously, Jeff was Director of Policy and Communication at the UK Health Development Agency and a senior civil servant in the Department of Health. And Jeff is the main author of the Technical Social Marketing Guide, which was developed in 2014 for the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control. Currently, Jeff is a visiting professor at Brighton University and a fellow at King's College London University. And since 2009, he has been the CEO of Strategic Social Marketing Limited, which works internationally with private companies, NGOs, and governments to develop and evaluate social programs that aim to influence behavior. Jeff, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know your presentation will be relevant and meaningful to everyone hearing it. So let's get started. Over to you.
Okay, thanks so much. You can all see the first slide for this presentation. Just before I start, as well as saying, it's a huge pleasure to be here and make a contribution to this fantastic series of webinars. And as fantastic as webinars are, I hope this isn't the future where we all sit in our little boxes and communicate via screens and audio. Thankfully, with all those very clever people out there and some social marketers making some great contributions, we'll get back to some normality, hopefully, in the not too distant future. A couple of just announcements before I start. First of all, some of you may know the European Social Marketing Association is running a conference in Thessaloniki, Greece, in October 21st and 23rd. The decision with that presentation conference at the moment is that it's still going ahead. We're looking for contributions and papers, so please do put your paper forward for that event, and hopefully by then we'll be able to get together in person. And just putting on what Patrick mentioned at the top end of the introduction, ISMA is also putting out a statement about COVID-19, and that should be going out later tomorrow. So please look out for that. Again, there's some guidance building on the great work that our colleagues in Australia have already put out. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about creating social and personal value. And I think not only does it sit at the heart of the contribution that social marketing makes to more effective, efficient, and ethical social practice, it's also going to be absolutely crucial if we're going to tackle and reduce the harm considerably associated with COVID-19. I'll try and bring in examples of why I think that's the case. If I can, I'll go through the presentation so we get at least 10 to 15 minutes, if I can, of Q&A at the end. Okay, so let's get going. If you want to contact me afterwards, my details are here. Please follow up and I'll certainly respond to you. As I understand it, you'll get a full set of these presentation slides as well and have access to them. So what we're going to cover today is the nature of social value creation and why it's imperative for effective, efficient, and ethical social practice. Personal and social value creation, what it is, how can we understand it, some examples of how we can destroy value in social programs, and some examples of how we can create it, and then a summary section on what do we need to actually do to make sure that our social marketing programs are based around and built on the concept of social value. When we think about what social marketing is, this is the ISMA Global Consensus definition of social marketing. And without going through it in any kind of detail, what jumps out of you from this definition is it's about creating individual benefit and community benefit to promote social good. So this is about the value. The word value isn't there, but that's what it's implied in this definition of what we're all trying to achieve and deliver. Okay, so why is value creation absolutely central and critical to delivering effective programs from organizations? We know a lot about how to create effective social policy in lower, middle, and higher income countries. And if we look at lots of research that's been done on why some social programs fail, they have these kinds of characteristics. They're often short-term, high cost. There's little understanding of behavior. The focus is on activity and not actual impact or outcome. There's often poor coordination and poor evaluation. And I hope, in terms of COVID-19, and I see some signs of this, these kinds of characteristics are being reduced, but I still see some of these manifesting themselves in the current crisis and the way that it's being tackled. Particularly, I think, around the issue of an incomplete or partial understanding of what we know about big population behavioral change, particularly in pandemic circumstances. We also know that in addition to COVID-19, which is a complex problem to address, on a daily basis we're dealing with a whole bunch of other complex issues. And social marketing is being applied in many of these areas quite successfully. Again, I would say built around often creating real value for people. And what we also, if you look at this kind of set of existing problems that we're dealing with, many of them are also going to have a direct impact on COVID-19. A great paper today coming from South Korea, talking about the need to address things like inequality and poverty as part of any COVID-19 response. What we also know, as well as dealing with complex problems, and we know a lot about how to design effective social policy interventions, we also know that in many countries there's a huge pushback from citizens about wanting to be engaged in and listened to in terms of developing more effective social programs. This is an example from the UK, where people are given personalized budgets to elderly people and infirm people to control, give them more control over what kinds of services they get. So basically they're given the money from the state for their own care, and they decide how that money is used. What results from this is people's satisfaction from the care that they receive in latter life goes up, and the actual spend goes down. This is about value creation. We also need to think about the demand that's coming from citizens, again, low, middle, and high income countries, for more voice in programs and more choice. People want to be heard, they want to be listened to, and they also want to be given more choice. Sometimes that choice is economic choice, maybe a voucher in the education system to be spent how you would want. Sometimes it's non-economic choice, but maybe that could include things like a choice of service provider. So you don't actually hold the money, but you have the power to choose different providers of service. But most importantly, and most critically, people want voice. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. They want what they have to say taken into account when social programs are being designed, delivered, and evaluated. We also know that in terms of human values, there are a number of core human values that are consistent in the world and to a large extent as well. Things like people universally value conformity, beneficence, security, and doing good, being altruistic. This insight gives us a lot of understanding about how we construct programs in such a way that they will be valued by members of the public. Let's talk about and think about social marketing now and how this kind of connects with value proposition delivery and development. These are the kind of 6 global consensus definition principles of what good social marketing practice entails. Well, what you see, one of the key factors, and these are not in any kind of order, is value proposition delivery via an intervention mix. So what that means is people collectively developing and delivering interventions, full mix of social marketing interventions, but based on the proposition that they are valued and respected, wanted, desired by members of the public, people that we're seeking to help and serve. This is a kind of this slide showing social marketing values itself, as well as universal human values. There are a number of values that Ross Gordon and myself believe are indicated in most social marketing practice: mutuality, reciprocity, participation, creativity, and so on. So lots of social marketers are applying those principles on an ongoing basis as part of good practice. How can social marketing practically add value to addressing these social issues? Well, Ross and I and others believe that there are a number of practical things that we should be doing to ensure that this is the case. Relationship development with customers and citizens, relationship marketing, if you like, is a core way to achieve the development of value in programs. Citizen insight, gathering and investing in psychographic understanding of different segments of the population really adds to our social marketing impact. Relationship marketing and management also can help us deliver a co-production of social marketing interventions. Coalition development, connecting social marketing programs may be driven from one sector, government or NGO sector, with stakeholders from other sectors, can improve the amplification and increase value delivery. And also, we think that kind of marketing practice also helps with efficiency and economic evaluation of programs, including value for money type of evaluations as part of process evaluation. This next slide, ethical principles. These are principles that a subgroup working on behalf of ISMA really shared with the membership around the kinds of principles we feel should sit underneath principles of best practice to guide social marketing project and program development, and again add another layer of value to programs, i.e. assurance that social marketing practitioners are addressing ethical issues to create social good. Okay, so marketing and value creation, as many of you I'm sure come from a kind of marketing background. This is the definition from the American Marketing Association. Value is a core part of marketing kind of process, and as I'm sort of making the case for, I think it's also part of social marketing value creation and benefit. In social marketing, we're not talking about shareholder value or profit for individuals who own companies. We're talking about an interconnection and a mix of personal individual value creation, but also social value creation. And there, of course, is a tension in those two things between personal good and benefit and social good and benefit.
Let's look at some dimensions of value. What do we mean when we're talking about value? where there are functional elements of value: economic, emotional, social, interpersonal, ecological, social, and cultural, at least, and probably a few more. If we think about some of these domains of value, let's just very simply think about kind of economic approaches to value creation, of course. So, in terms of economic value, maybe the financial cost of being ill associated with COVID-19. If you fall sick, you can't go to work. The value of engaging in some of the mitigating actions you can take, like social distancing. So social distancing might not just have a psychological benefit, but a direct economic benefit. There's also kind of, rather than just this simple economic value and exchange model, there's also value in use model. The emotional and experiential value you get from engaging in particular actions. Maybe having clean hands. The process of cleaning your hands, that you get nicer, cleaner hands. Also, again, some psychological benefit from that in terms of a sense of safety and control. And then there's value in behaviour, actually, benefit and value to you, self-perceived value, and also social value in undertaking some of the behaviours that we're encouraging people to do in terms of COVID-19. So when we're thinking about value, sources of value, and the nature of value, there are, as this additional slide shows, quite a few sources of value we can think about for people, and it's important to understand which ones of these we're actually trying to trigger when we're developing our social marketing projects and programs. There's also, it's worth thinking about these additional kind of elements of value creation. A lot of value for people is self-created. The way that we decide to, decisions we make, choices we make, how we live our lives, creates personal kind of value for us. But there's a continuum here through to co-created value as well. So it's not just individuals working to create value in terms of economic, social, spiritual value for themselves. There's also, it's worth thinking about the co-creation of value, where people in groups and family groups and societies and cultures get together and create value. And there are other dimensions of value that's worth thinking about, things like consumer dominant value creation, where we think about, again, in purely economic terms, in terms of value that's accrued for people, value they perceive in products and so on. What we know in terms of developing successful social programs that seek to influence behavior is that there are a number of characteristics that tend to indicate that programs are going to have a better chance of being successful. One of them is actually the application of social marketing. There are lots of international reviews now that recognize the important added value of adopting those 6 social marketing principles to creating more effective and efficient social programs that address a wide range of different behaviors. And again, an equally large and growing body of work looking at the absolute imperative of engaging people in an understanding of what they consider to be of value and what might help to move and motivate them, but also their active engagement in the development, delivery, and evaluation of these programs. So rather than being done to or told what to do by a group of experts, the active acceptance of people's voice and engaging, putting effort into engaging them in the development of programs really has a double benefit of making the program more effective and efficient, but also upping the kind of acceptability and engagement of that program by the people that we're seeking to help. So again, in terms of co-creation of value, and I think that's what we're talking about now, there's a whole kind of series of sub-elements to the code design, the code development, co-evaluation of these programs. What they are all pointing at is a move towards a more citizen-centric, user-led, user-informed, code-delivered future in terms of social programs and social marketing program delivery. People like OECD have recently talked about the need to work with people and citizens to understand problems and deliver solutions. And I guess one of the things that I'm kind of most worried about at the moment in terms of COVID-19 is that what I'm seeing around the world, and I can understand the need to do this in terms of the current strategy from government seems to be very top-down, expert-driven, expert-defined problems, very authoritative people in positions of position of power, telling people what the problem is, how it needs to be fixed, and urging them to do it, sometimes compelling people to do things. That I can understand the need for that kind of intervention now. I mean, part of that, I'm sure, is to breed a sense of trust and head off kind of sense of kind of panic. But that probably is going to be a suboptimal strategy going forward because people are going to start to push back, and particularly in free democracies where there's freedom of the press, there's certainly going to be continuous scrutiny of that kind of expert knowledge, expert-led problem definition and solution generation. So I think what we're going to need to do, if we're going to be more effective going forward and probably through the next 6 to 12 months of this epidemic or pandemic, is a bigger effort on engaging citizens and also leveraging in the expertise and capacity that they have to help solve the problem. Because quite frankly, it's going to take tens of thousands, millions of citizens around the world to start pitching in and solving this problem, and not just being seen as being part of the kind of herd of infection that needs to be controlled and corralled. An example of co-creation, delivery, and enablement using the assets that people bring to the table. There are many of this kind of scheme is the one that's on the slide. Is an encouragement for every driver, if they have a car cam, to record dangerous driving and registrations and feed them through to the police. So basically getting the citizen population of the country to help police road traffic laws, and technology obviously can enable that. Things like the Me Too movement also we need to bear in mind in terms of value creation and co-creation. This is a co-created, community-driven movement, enabled through social media. I don't see much of this at all happening other than kind of sniping at kind of professional and expert opinion that's being put out at the moment. But what I would like to see in terms of COVID-19 is a more proactive and kind of government-enabled and supported social media to help spread the message about what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and supporting people to undertake those behaviours that we know will protect people. Again, an example, many examples in the environmental movement of engaging with people and getting them to police, demand change in the system, and in the case of COVID-19, helping people to police and promote the protection of all citizens. Look at the management literature in terms of customer satisfaction. There are lots of learnings in that about how we go about developing more citizen satisfaction and engagement, and the list of 7 elements on this kind of slide kind of gives you an outline of the kinds of things organizations should be doing routinely, not just in emergency situations like we are now, to engage with citizens more, and through that process create more value, personal and social value. And again, there's a big literature on participatory service design and co-creation. Not only literature, but good practice learning out there about how we can actually practically run processes that ensure that citizens are understanding their beliefs, their values, their aspirations and fears are taken into account when we create these kinds of social programs and interventions. So the mechanics of doing this exist, is what I'm saying. Okay, and again, this is a recent report from WPP looking at falling trust in leaders. So adopting a kind of top-down, expert-driven, experts know best, do what we say kind of mentality is not only not going to be optimal in terms of getting the change that we want, because people will increasingly push back against this. It's certainly not going to create the kind of social value that we need people to buy into in terms of tackling issues like the pandemic. So basically, a model that looks like this: expert-directed model, experts saying, "Do this, we know best. Your job is to comply," is something we need to move away from, and we need to move towards, I think, a more citizen-centric model where we're engaging and working with citizens. So, personal value creation, and just like a quick look at that. This is what people do. If you look at human psyche and human history, and to an extent, our genetic makeup, our evolved makeup as well, it's what we do. We trade, we exchange, we share, we like reciprocity, we cooperate, and that's what's made human beings a relatively successful species. This is what we do. We want to work together and collectively sort things out and create solutions that everybody values or at least can live with. I'm not a religious person, but when the Pope talks about artisans of the common good, and gives examples about how individuals, through the way that they behave and interact with their fellow citizens, can create social good, I think there's something in this, and this is something that we need to think about more, because the power of that mass population is huge if we can harness it and get people to be kind of pulling in the same kind of direction. This is an example from Australia of creating common good and citizens engaging in that. This is a way of stopping people falling asleep when they're driving along the road. What you can do this is on the Bruce Highway in Australia. A lot of people fall asleep. It's a long straight road. People fall asleep. Accidents. And so what they do is they have a system called the Driver Reviver, where you can pull into a station and have a sit down, get some free tea and coffee served to you by local volunteers. This creates the value of a social connection, but also less road deaths and accidents. And if we don't, seek to, people will just naturally seek to create value for themselves in programs. This is just a kind of humorous example from China, where if you want to get your 10,000 steps in every day, you can't be bothered to actually do it. You just go to the market and buy one of these rocking corridors for a couple of dollars, and it will rack up your 10,000 steps for you. Then you can impress your friends. The point of this slide is that people they're seeking to create value in a way that doesn't create too much effort for them as well. This is another example from Italy, the Bella Mossa scheme, where people can accrue points for things that they value, material things that they value. Things like if you travel in by bus or you walk or you cycle, you record it on your app, on your phone, you get points. You can exchange these points in the city, from the city authority, for beer, ice cream, or cinema tickets. Or one of the other things that people in Bologna value is social cohesion and working with their own local community. You can also, instead of spending the points on ice cream, beer, and cinema tickets, you can pool them with your neighbourhood, and the money goes into and charities locally. So understanding what people value and then using that to incentivize good transport behavior in this instance. In terms of how are we going to go about, creating some of this kind of value? Well, in social marketing, we're not just about individual change; we're about social transformation. So, populate level change as well. So we need to think at both that individual level, but also at a population level, and that involves working and seeking to influence policy, strategy, tactics, and operational level, not just campaigns, i.e., tactics and operations. And social marketing can assist with each of these levels of value creation. This is where value gets ultimately created. And it also implies working then at this kind of micro individual level, but also the community level and the environment and kind of policy level. Most social marketing tends to happen currently at the micro level. And one of the challenges going forward, I believe, is to exert more of influence and assistance to that meso and kind of macro level. Policy change, looking at that kind of macro level, can have a huge impact. You change the law, the way that things like plastic bags are promoted or kind of restricted, can have a huge impact. Already mentioned the importance of voice, making sure that people have a sense that they are being listened to. This is an example from the Grenfell Tower, which caught fire. There are many people who died because they were given wrong advice to stay put rather than exit this building. And there is a whole process associated with the kind of review of what happened in this building, which is just about listening to people and giving them a chance to speak about what they felt, what they know, what they didn't know, and their reactions to what happened in that disaster. So giving people a voice is also part of the healing process, but it's a way of creating trust between authorities and members of the public also. What we also increasingly see in the commercial sector is that business, hard-nosed business, is also beginning to understand, and this is Larry Franku, chairman of BlackRock, biggest investment group in the world, looking at value creation. It's not enough for companies now just to make money at the expense of others. It has to be about tackling some of those big social issues, and through that, obviously, providing social cultural value. Another example, Norwegian plant reward scheme. This is where if you exchange bottles in very convenient convenient locations, you get some money back. Yeah, I'm going to try and wrap up in the next couple of minutes, so I'll just jump a few slides, I think. But just a couple of examples of value destruction. If we don't set up services in such a way that young people and others, the target groups of services, are going to respond to them, then people are not going to show up. Okay, if people expect privacy in a reasonably comfortable environment, we don't provide that. It's no wonder they don't show up. If you, like they do in New Zealand, have a confusing bus system around the city, a lot of people are not going to want to use it. Whereas if you have a very convenient bus system that's logical and is used by all sections of society, somewhere like London, most people are going to use it. They're going to value that system. This is an example from Germany about destroying some value for people. If you've been out for a night and you go drinking in Germany and you go down an alleyway and because you want to urinate, what a lot of the clubs now do is paint the walls with water repellent paint, so you urinate and it comes back on your shoes, i.e. you're punished for doing a bad thing. Punishment can actually be a way of creating social value if there is popular consent for it, but if there's not, people are going to push back. I'm just going to jump to the summary section of this. Okay, so to sum up, there are some huge challenges. There's a lot of fantastic social marketing work going on out there, applying principles of what we know of best practice. But there are some things I think we need to maybe focus on a little bit more than we're doing at the moment. As I've said in the presentation, we're about creating both personal and social value, and that involves, of course, interventions driven by government, not-for-profit organisations, and increasingly private sector organisations. But it also means citizens are not just the recipient of that programme, they have to be seen as being part of the process of creating effective social marketing programs. That means understanding them and understanding what they would perceive as being interventions that have some benefit for them, their families, and their communities. We know that there are, certain things that we need to do if we're going to have more effective programs. We need data, we need insight about what people believe and know. We need to focus on this value creation element. We need systematic planning. We need a full toolbox of interventions. And we need to focus more on co-production, using all the assets that we have in a community to create value and to drive effective programs. So the bottom line is we need to move from this kind of expert-defined problem and solution generation into a situation where we're focusing on value to citizens. And that means really understanding citizens and what will move and motivate them, what they will accept in terms of restrictions and impingements on their freedom. Because if we don't have that understanding, the chances of developing successful interventions and sustaining them are pretty small. So this is really about participatory design as a key mechanism for creating value. And again, the technologies for doing this now exist and are well proven. Ultimately, I think it's about kind of moving towards a new kind of value building relationship, and it's away from a kind of what we call a tell, sell, and control approach to more of a social and personal value creation approach. So away from elements like this to elements that reflect more of the right-hand side of the screen markers in terms of the way that we would develop, deliver, and evaluate social marketing interventions. I won't go through this slide, it's rather busy. Let's just go back to it, sorry. But again, we know from a lot of management research, organizational research, there's a menu of well-known kinds of interventions that can create a more user, citizen-centric approach to value creation within organizations. All of these kind of practical mechanisms can be employed by organizations. There's nothing particularly magical about any of these. It just means actually putting some effort and time into making sure that they're built in to the operating fabric of organizations. If we adopt a more citizen-centric approach to kind of programming, it means we're understanding people more in the round. We're not just treating them as either infected people or non-infected people. We're understanding what affects their lives, how they make decisions, and how we can use that to create solutions or help them create solutions to some of the problems that they face. It's about working cross-sector and in a cross-disciplinary way and building coalitions of all interested parties and players to be working together in a more effective and efficient way. And it's about ongoing learning. Okay. So I think just to stop, to finish up with, what our job is in terms of value creation within social marketing is to help citizens demand engagement in the selection, development, implementation, and evaluation of all of the social marketing programs that we're delivering. If we do that, we've got a fighting chance. And just the last slide I want to kind of leave you with is a way to think about this, I think, is that if we want to develop and deliver more effective social marketing programs, part of that is creating value. But in a sense, that's a kind of a small game we have to play. So running better projects and programs and campaigns, creating value for people, which means understanding them, that's really important. And I think we could do a lot more on that than we're doing currently. But if you kind of buy into any of what I've just been talking about for the last 30 minutes or so, the bigger challenge for you is to start to try to reorientate the organization within which you work to adopt these practices, not just for what might be isolated social marketing projects and programs, but the way the whole organization operates. On what I'm not seeing, just taking it back to COVID-19 at the moment, what I see in the kind of governments that I've been looking at so far is that they are not adopting particularly a kind of citizen-centric approach to understanding the problem and delivering solutions. What we're seeing is this top-down approach, which has its place, absolutely, but is not going to, I think, get the sustained change that we're going to need to tackle COVID-19, or actually any of the other complex issues that we're all seeking to make a contribution towards. So I'm going to stop there. I know I'm a bit over. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but hopefully we've still got a bit of time for a few Q&As. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you again for everyone's patience while we worked out those technical problems. And Jeff, they got solved, so we got to hear the rest of your presentation. And yes, if it's all right with everyone, we will go over time a little bit so that we can get some questions and answers in. Possibly, I don't know, it could be maybe 5-10 minutes over. If you need to leave, we understand. And the recording will be in the archives and the slides will be in the archives on the ISMA website so that you can access them there if you do have to leave early. So let's go to the first question that came in from Nancy Lee. She says, Jeff, what are the top 2 to 3 things social marketers could do to contribute to reducing the coronavirus impact?
Thanks, Nancy, for that question. I think what we should try to do, at whatever level we operate, is to try and get a seat at the table with the people that are developing and delivering the current interventions, because I'm in contact with a few kind of countries, and I just don't see that happening at the moment. I think there are some great communicators in there doing a good job, but I don't think there are many social marketers that are intimately engaged with developing, national/international strategy. So I think fight and push for a seat at the table. I think some of the guidance and statement documents that are coming out now from the social marketing community are going to really helpful in that. So please kind of try and feed them in to your organizations or whatever level you kind of work at. So for me, that will be, number one. And number 2 might be, I think we might want to start joining some of the kind of critical voice that there is starting to, develop now around some of the approaches that are being applied. So yeah, we're friends, and we obviously want to make a contribution, but I also think we have a role to be a critical friend when we see practice that, from our experience and from what we know from research is probably not going to be an optimal intervention. So help, befriend, support, seat at the table, but be critical when needed.
Okay, Kelly Dennings is asking you, well, she's making a statement and asking for your thoughts. The statement is, I think our field could use training in coalition building. And what are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
I mean, in terms of training lots of public health professionals, in this case, about the power of social marketing principles, I think that's will be really useful, and is ongoing. And I think there's a real demand for that, and it's great to see the ISMA accredited course coming through. the other thing is, as I mentioned in the presentation, yeah, absolutely, coalition building is the way to go. That's not, I don't say that from any ideological perspective. It just seems to me that's what the evidence is screaming out for us, that, governments can't, as much as they will try, can't force populations to do stuff and sustain that over a long period of time, which we're going to need to do. It needs to be a coalition response of governments, NGOs, charities, private sector, and so on, but also engaging with communities in whichever form that they're around. So, I would want to see coalitions that have a big presence of, citizens on them as well, represented through whatever means is appropriate in a particular country. So, yeah, I think both training and coalition development are key strategies.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, but Sanayan Ajosi has a question. In terms of value creation, are there tools to guide the conversation in drawing out value from the target audience? How do you find that value?
Yeah, there's quite a few kind of guides out there now. I'm happy if anybody wants to send me an email afterwards about how you go about designing value propositions for products or services or particular target groups. There's also a lot of kind of literature in the design field around how do you design products and services and systems that people will value. So there is a pretty good literature out there that we can draw on. So yeah, any individual on the call, drop me a line and I'll send you some references to that material.
And Juan Manuel Rosales asks, is there some kind of toolkit, best practices, or critical factors regarding participatory design?
Yeah, there are. Same answer basically to as previously. There's several books and guidance documents about doing that. There are also organisations. For instance, in the UK, there's an organisation called the Design Council. They have a number of free publications you can download from their websites. But most countries will have similar kind of associations.
Okay, and I think you may have answered Catherine Owen's question, which is, can you provide examples of community co-creation in social marketing campaigns?
Yeah, well, there's one I just throw in there very quickly. It's in the kind of childhood nutrition kind of field. The EPOD program, which started in France, but it's now kind of franchised internationally, is a great example of one of its key principles is the application of social marketing. But it's all about getting local coalitions, including political coalitions, schools, faith groups, and so on, together to define what the problem is, and then start to create solutions to it. So the absolute opposite of an expert-defined problem, expert-defined set of interventions. So the EPOD program, if you Google that, you should be able to find it quite easily. If not, drop me a line.
Okay, we'll keep going with some more questions here. We're getting through them very nicely. Patricia, again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing, Gerviers. She says, hi, Jeff, thank you. Here in France, we are contained, and there is a big PB of acceptance. I don't know what PB stands for, though, but she says, if you have any idea to help people to stay at home. Because that could be a place of pushback. People are not, the competing values here. There's a value for health and preventing, acquiring the COVID-19, but then there's I want to go out, I need to shop, I need social contact. How do you help them stay at home? Yeah,
I think one of the things is there's kind of, part of the issue here is confusion. When people say stay at home, does that mean you can go out to do your shopping? Or does it literally mean you don't leave the door or not? So I think that is, governments need to be clear about that. And I think what they actually mean is social distance. Don't come into any unnecessary contact, but you can go out. So that, being clear with people. I think, what I've seen so far is quite a few announcements, and then, the media and social media start to unpick the announcement because there isn't absolute clarity. one of the, I think, disciplines that social marketing brings to this kind of behavioral influence work is we are pretty good usually at making sure that objectives are very explicit behavioral objectives, smart, if you like. So there is no ambiguity about what we're asking people to do. So I think being clear about exactly what it is we're talking about with people. My understanding, the advice is generally it is possible to go out. You just don't you social distance if you go out for what you don't get within a couple of probably 2-3 meters of anybody else. So being clear, I think, would really help. But the other thing, in terms of getting people to comply more generally, I think what I haven't seen hardly anything on is a segmented approach to behaviour, because they're going to be, we know people are not all going to react, in the same way. They're going to be different groups of people with different, motivations, if you like, or would value advice like that very, very differently. So I think what we need to start doing, if we're going to be more effective in getting people to comply with what we're asking them to do, is we can, of course, just send the police in, like saying, and fine anybody that's found on the streets. But my guess is that that's not something that can be, applied in a blanket way, everywhere, probably even sustained in Spain. So we need to understand the motivations of different groups and then start to tailor kind of persuasion messages, if you like, and also maybe some cohesion for individual groups. In a sense, what is going to persuade some people to stay at home is not going to persuade other people to stay at home. And I think a blanket approach, again, I can understand why it's being brought in first off, but as we need to go through this process, we need to get more sophisticated, I think, and start thinking about different ways to persuade different people to comply. Some people, we're going to have to police them. Other people, the motivation might not be their own personal safety. It might be a very altruistic view about helping others. So that is information I'm not privy to, but it's information I think we need to start gathering. So we need to start developing a more segmented approach, I think is where I'm getting to.
Okay, and I think we'll just get one more question, and maybe there's a quick answer to this, or you can refer the questioner to some sources. It's Florian Berkey saying, Jeff, which channels and economic models can be used to do scale up of social value creation?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure there is a kind of easy answer to that one.
Is there any sources to look at?
Yeah, let me think on that one. Send me an email, and I'll scratch my head and think.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to everyone who asked questions, and thank you to Jeff for taking the time to answer all these questions and provide the resources and direction for going forward. And really appreciate you making the time to be here today, and everyone making the time. And thank you to everyone who was able to stay a little late today as well. I will hand it back over to Christine.
Great. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Jeff. And thanks to all of you for participating today and for your understanding. If you'll stay on with us for just a couple more minutes, we'd like to get your feedback and also share some other next steps. On your screen now, you'll see a couple of quick questions about the quality of today's webinar. We know audio was a challenge, but we're really looking for content of the webinar. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your expertise and professionalism guiding us through that complicated moment. I think you were able to get past that hurdle pretty quickly and make sure that you're providing excellent content as always. So please add your thoughts there to the poll. In the last few moments of the webinar, feel free to add ideas for future webinar topics you'd like us to cover or other changes that we should consider. You can either add those in the chat box or feel free to email me directly. One of the questions that someone asked was about examples of community co-creation in social marketing campaigns. And I do encourage you, if you are an ISMA member, to check out the webinar archive. 2 of our most recent webinars actually gave some great examples of co-creation that were used. So lots of great details right in those webinars, so be sure to check those out. If we can go on to the next slide. We would like to invite those of you who joined today's free webinar who are not members to please be a member of the International Social Marketing Association. When you join the ISMA, you also become a member of your regional association, and you'll be part of a network of hundreds of social marketers and have access to a broader set of professional development materials, discounts to conferences, and access to all 38 of our recorded and archived webinars. Today's webinar, as we've mentioned a couple of times, will be added to the archive in the next few days as part of that member-only access. As Patrick mentioned earlier, we are working to quickly pull together a focused webinar series on COVID-19, coronavirus, and social marketing. This is obviously something that will continue to be top of minds for so many of us. So please follow ISMA on social media for updates as we try to do our best to pull that together as quickly as possible for you. I'd like to give great thanks to Dave Cutter for handling the normal technical aspects of the webinar as well as today's challenges. We always appreciate your guidance, Dave, as well as to the wider team for all the work that goes in organizing these events, especially during these challenging times that we're dealing with professionally and personally. We really appreciate your support and dedication to getting this information to the social marketing community. Thanks, everyone. And Patrick, over to you for a few final words.
Great. Thanks very much, Christine. I'm not going to say too much more. I think you've really summed it up well. Just thank you to everyone for sticking with us and to this incredible webinar team that is always professional and flexible. And Jeff, just a fabulous webinar, so really appreciate it. Just want to thank all of you, our members and participants in today's webinar for both your support and participation. We hope to see you in the next webinar. And to echo Jeff, we also hope to see you in person at multiple events coming up over the next year or two. So until then, please stay safe. Visit us online at the ISMA website. Follow us on social media. This is the International Social Marketing Association, and we now conclude today's